Sarah and Deanne, we'd love to see you. If you can come join us. There. Hi, Sarah. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having this activity.
Of course. Of course. What else would I be doing? My whole life is lit up for this moment, guys. I feel like maybe that's true for some of you too. Like we've been just waiting for somebody to sort of say, it's time to go all in. It's time to believe all that sweetness that you hold in your heart for hope for humanity, right? It's time to go all in. And I've just, I've been holding this for so long, and it's just in the last several months come so clear that there was going to be a tipping point, a place where we would all show up and say yes collectively. You know, we've all gone through the work of saying yes to life individually, but to move into that place where we do it collectively, where we look around and go, I'm not crazy, right? You're not crazy, right? Like there's a way out of this. There's a way into this heart of humanity, that there's a backdoor hack that can overcome the malware of fear that has been the corruption story of our human operating system from the very beginning. And so I want you to just hold that beauty, that thought, that truth in your sweet breath as you take it in, that we are here at exactly this moment in time, this thing I'm going to talk about tonight, the calculus of you, all the inputs of you lining up perfectly with the calculus of now, like, right? All the beautiful things that are happening around us. And I know they don't always feel, look, sound, hit our bodies as beautiful, but birth often looks very messy and raw and painful and bloody. And it takes deep, deep breaths to navigate that space, that holy place in us that knows how to birth something, knows how to hold on to light in the dark, right? Like we never lost that inner light. Can you just take that breath with me? Like, I'm not crazy. You're all here to tell me tonight that I'm not crazy. Can I just get an amen on that one right up front, that there is a light inside all of us that is a known place, that we may have forgotten the detail, the form, the texture, the truth of it, but we never lose it because it is us, right?
Amen.
Amen. Right? It's the thing that brings us right to this moment where we feel the beckoning and the becoming of who we are. This, do you feel that energy? I'm not crazy, right? There's a tension, a transformational tension, like when if you hung around mama's giving birth or ever seen it, that point where the crown is just right, what we call the corona moment of birth, where that tension between being in the dark and coming into the light, breathing together for the first time, that ride, I feel it in my belly every day. And in the beginning, it felt like indigestion. It wasn't comfortable. It was awkward, and it caused me to be cranky with myself and others because I didn't understand why I wasn't following the rules, and it wasn't working for me. Like that inner tension between who you really are, your light, and this world that we're living in. That tension is personal, but it's also collective. It's something that we all feel deep in our knowingness, right? So how do we get there? How do we reboot the human operating system back to love? And I'm just gonna check in. I got some. Oh, sweet Sarah, I'm just glad you're here for what you're here for. Everybody will come and go in this lifetime, and I just trust that you'll get what you came for. And I'm going to share my screen because I did some really fun slides for tonight. And if you know my history, you know that I come from a corporate background, and I just couldn't help myself. I'm going to be the medicine woman who does it with slides. That's just the way it's going to be. I've got my rattle and I've got my sage wand, but do not take away my slide deck, because this is where the channel comes to life for me. It's how do you take all of this wisdom codes that come through us and move it out into the ether, make it available to others. And for me, that has been the biggest effort for me, is really trusting that I am a bridge, that I am here to bring an awareness back into our bodies through breath and the intention behind that breath. And that is what the healing conversation is and has been for me all of my life. I began asking these questions about life very early. There was a wound that came so soon in my arrival that I quickly had to switch into a place of trust outside of the people who were taking care of me. And what that ended up being was a place inside me, a sacred place inside me that brought me back to my light pretty early in the game. And so from the very beginning, I started asking these questions like, why are we not figuring out that love is how we get through this? Why are we struggling, hesitating to heal? Why do we act in ways that are going against our own enlightened self-interest to such a degree that we're in a suicide pact? Like, I'm asking this shit really early on, and I got nobody around me to answer it, because my world does not reflect what is going on inside me. And I'm going to ask you again to acknowledge in this moment that you've had a hint of this in you too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's a deep central core of knowing that we are not living in alignment with our light. And to the degree that you were sensitive to that dissonance in your own body from an early age, you showed up with a bigger ask of the human experience. And I believe that those of us with a bigger ask are part of the answer. Can you feel that? Can you trust that thing that has beckoned you into your own becoming is now coming into a place where we are all going to do it together, right? Like, we have to look around the room and say, I'm not crazy and you're not crazy. None of us are crazy. In fact, we are going sane. We are coming out of this stage of craziness. Yeah?
Yeah.
And that coming into sanity is a rough ride, because there's a reality that comes full frontal in our own story that we have to be able to reconcile. So the call to heal takes us to deep, dark night of the soul places. None of us got here without first going through our own rebirthing tunnel of darkness and tension and messiness and relationships and businesses and a whole lives started over. The trajectory of shift in many of our stories is whiplash worthy for some to be witnessing from the outside. But each step of the way, we trusted something. And we walked away from things that no longer served us, and we stopped betraying our own deepest knowing, and we began to move into this new trust, not in things outside of us, but things inside of us, so deep, rooted so profoundly to our own core. Can you trust that and say, yeah, I got that part? I don't think you would be in this space with me. I know this because the resonance that comes through this sacred place that I trust meets others in that same sacred place. So I got to tell you, I've had imposter syndrome my whole life, as a public speaker, as an author, as a human. Like, somebody's going to figure out, I don't know what the shit I'm doing here, right? Somebody's going to call me out on my identity crisis because I'm having it every day, right? But somewhere along the way, some part of me got over that imposter syndrome and said, where is the ease in your body, woman? Where is the alignment with your soul? And so I just keep showing up here and bringing this offering to you that brings ease to me, because I can't exist in a world that isn't trying. And I'm willing to be the fool for love. I'm willing to look like I don't know what I'm doing, because the truth is I don't. I'm just following the prompt, the beckoning and the becoming that keeps calling me forward. And tonight is a launch of a major trust of that. I've been dancing in the shadows, little Lee, and others have had tests of me in private sacred space, and the channel's open, and it's really pretty stuff that comes through. But I've been nervous about showing up this way because I was confused between the difference between guru and teacher. I am not a guru. I am a teacher, and what I show up teaching people, yes. And you're not my first group. I did this for 30 years with a very skeptical group of humans who didn't think they could move from one way of being to another. I worked with accountants. Come on, there's a karmic ending here that wins. Gets me to a place where understanding the difference between inductive and deductive behaviors helped me become a bridge builder. So deductive is you can see it. You can taste it. You already exist in part with that vision that you hold. And that trust is so great in you that you don't, when somebody says, well, how are you going to get there? You go, one step at a time. And I'm going to trust that inner knowing. I'm going to feel my way, because the way knows the way, right? And that's deductive humans. And then there's 80% of the rest of the population, which are inductive, that love your description. They're like, oh, that looks really nice out there, trusting humans again. Wow, what would it be like if we didn't have to feel like we had to look over our shoulder for our well-being? It was just part of the human construct that we all, wow, that's a big idea. And an economy based on healing, based on expanding human potential. Wow, what is she taking? I'll have some of what she's having, right? Like, and I'll tell you tonight, I'm on cannabis, THC. The healing conversation is a cannabis sacred expression on this planet. Because I do see what we are in our full, pure potentiality. I trust it, maybe more than most. And that's why I'm a teacher, because I'm going to show you how I learned to trust my own inner knowing. I'm not going to tell you what to trust, because I trust that your inner knowing is going to line up with mine, because it's love. It's love is all there is. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, and when we make this lens of love that we're going to take on together, and we're going to create a whole lexicon of language around what it means to look at a problem through the lens of love, where we're no longer looking for who to blame or who to shame, or use it as a way to game our way to some power position, right? That's what the patriarchy, or what I call the doctrine of dominion, is all about. It's this idea that to stay safe, we have to dominate. And we've lost track of the idea that we don't dominate or we die. That's the absolute death of our human story. We co-create, we don't dominate. That's when we step into our height of divinity, our truest knowing, and you know it and I know it. So now we just have to collectively start to trust our own imaginations, because it's what got us here. And what's lacking in the world today, we suffer for a lack of imagination. And it's because wounding, there's a direct correlation. I know this because I've danced with this my whole life, between wounding and the death of imagination, the death of hope. There is a structural traumatic malware that forever puts us in a state of hypervigilance with the world, not trusting it, not trusting the human experience, not fully consenting to the human experience. And what we are at right now, this moment in time, is the age of consent. We've entered into this beautiful moment of collective self-awareness that if we keep going this way, it's not going to end well. See, that backdoor hack, our human operating system is like, it's wired for love. Our bodies are biologically wired for love. We don't need to be told how to heal this planet. We don't get our healing from outside of us. We get it by embodying the truth of our own bodies, that love and connection is what brings us into the unified field here in a physical plane. So all that just came direct, and I have not even gotten my first slide. So I'm good. This is where PowerPoint meets medicine woman, because it keeps me on task. But first, let me ask you, are we having fun yet?
Yes.
Is this resonating?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. All right, good. All right. So my mom died 7 years ago and some change. And on the day she died, we had been in such an enmeshed state of being our whole life. She either lived with or next door to me nearly my whole adult life. And so I had never individuated from my mom. I was still carrying her energy to such a large degree that when she passed away, I had the sense that my mother mortgage was paid off and that I owned myself free and clear. And in that expansion, with a little bit of medicine on board, I laid on our back porch, and I just had this huge download, this incredible moment of grace where grief met acceptance, where, and this is a new formula that's just come through, grief plus acceptance equals grace. That's basically the algorithm of now that we have to begin to embrace. But as I was holding that space of seeing my mother in her wounding as a child, and how she did the very best she could, knowing what she knew, and like, there's nothing to forgive when you really show up present to our innocence, that we were all born sacred and beautiful and innocent, and the set and setting of our arrival began to create layers and textures of personality and fear, and you know, part of the healing conversation that is so beautiful to do with people, and we're going to do it live. People are going to let me take them through this piece of the healing conversation where we look at our timelines and we begin to see how we loop around the same wound, the same patterns. And in that recognition, there's like this golden thread that jumps out of the tapestry of your life that you get to now pull and weave into this beautiful new tapestry of sacred appreciation for all that you've experienced in this life. And so that came pouring down on me the day my mom died, this just absolute leveling up moment of appreciation that had this not happened, that wouldn't have happened. Had that not happened, that wouldn't have happened. Like you could start to begin to unpack all the gems, all the jewels of your story through a lens of compassion and maybe even a little self-hero worship moments where you go, dang, I made it through that and I didn't kill another human, or holy cow, that was a rough ride, having a pulmonary embolism and dying. Yeah, why did I have to go through that one? Except that I would have a deep appreciation for how important breath is in rebooting the human operating system. When you can't breathe anymore and you're given a choice about whether you want to go back to the human experience or not, are you ready to consent? And I did, and I took my first breath post-death, and something kicked a barn door open, and I began to just move into this open field of awareness, and medicine work came into my story. But it wasn't until the day my mom died that I could finally clear the mental landscape of overdependence between us and begin to go inward for what my expression was without having to worry about how it was going to land on her, right? Big day. So big forgiveness, got it all. Even working out the forgiveness stuff with my dad. His story comes later. But what came next was this genesis for the healing conversation. And I'm sharing this with you because I want you to close your eyes and feel the prescientness of what this was. This was 2014. And what came through clear as a bell is that we are coming into a time where truth would become lies, lies would become truth, and it is in service, get that, in service to bringing us back to that inward guidance system, to trusting our inner knowing. That life is happening for us, not to us. The chaos is the blessing, where we finally reach that threshold of, change seems a little easier than not changing at this point. Okay, like we begin to see within our own self-interest that doing the right thing is the only thing left for us. Like we're done navigating what truth looks like. We know what truth looks like. It looks like a society where we take care of each other, where we show up for each other, that there is a balance between the me and the we, and that there is no winner or loser, or we all lose. The doctrine of dominion is the death of humanity. It is only when we come into this, not middle ground, but higher ground, because we cannot agree on anything. And so lies become truth, truth become lies. And it's the storytellers that are going to bring us home. It's the artists, it's the musicians, it's the experiences where we get out of our head and into the feminine, the right side of our brain that knows how to be intuitive, knows how to sing a song, knows how to birth things. That's where the divine creative is in the feminine. Guys, you had your turn last time. Now it's our turn. Trust us. We know how to birth things. This is a time where the feminine will bring us home because she knows. She's reminded every month of her life practically that she cycles through the life and death of an egg in her body. The feminine knows, and the feminine exists in equal balance across the human expression. There is just this story we have, and that's a whole other conversation. We'll have that on another night. This story we have about the spectrum of expression, skin, preferences, tendencies, interests. Who gives a shit? Be B. We won't even care about the labels when we get to the other side. But the inductive guy goes,
Right.
all right, Edie, that looks beautiful. I can almost get myself there. I've got some issues I would still have to work on, but I'm aware now. Thank you for showing me your wild and crazy imagination. How do we get there? And they want to know step by step. They want to know that it's safe to go into the unknown. Because part of their story is the unknown is not safe. So we show up as co-regulators to a traumatized world to breathe with humans. And tonight, that's what I want to talk to you about is how do we move from passive consciousness, this beautiful internal landscaping that we've created for ourselves, this world where we can navigate through the pain and the suffering and not take it on. We've done a lot of work to reach this inner landscape, right, Mike? I know, I see what you write. It took you a long time to get here, and now what's being asked of you is to let others in. Oh man. You mean I got to engage with the world at this level of consciousness? Can I just keep the blinders on so when I go out, I love the mask. The mask is working for me. You know? I don't have to engage. This is insane out here, right? Like there is this self-preservation gene that says, oh, it's just not worth it. It's just so hard. Everybody's so rough on the edges right now. Everybody's just grating up against each other about everything. Have you ever seen us? We're polarized about what to eat. We're polarized about how to sleep. We're polarized about what drugs are good, which ones are bad. We're polarized about sex. We're polarized about politics. That's just the weaponization of all of those other points of distinction that we've made about who we are. And none of it is true. It's all an illusion. And we know that. And it makes us crazy. But some of us are going sane. And I love Einstein's quote where he talks about I'm dyslexic and I have a savant thing. It helps me remember the really important stuff, but the detail is lost. So just trust me. There's a beautiful quote by Einstein where he talks about changing the level of thinking, right? You all know the quote that the problems you created with this level of thinking is not going to help you get out of those problems, right? I know there's 19 other ways to say that better, but you know what I'm saying. We have to move our consciousness into an open field of shared, unified field of codes. Part of the vision that I've been given from the very beginning is there's no such thing as proprietary ownership. There's no such thing as intellectual property rights. Everything I'm sharing here, I make my heart open to the world. I make all this goes out there with nothing attached. And I want people to take these questions, this information that I've been sort of building around and coalescing around. And for 3 years, I went on walkabout. It was 3 years ago this month, I bought a little motorhome, almost ended my marriage. That's another story. Went to Burning Man. Oh my God, that was a sensory overload for a hermit that was trying to come out of her old story, right? Like, that's what almost ended my marriage. And then I went on walkabout, and that walkabout was to find my edges. I called it my Find My Edges tour because I didn't know where I ended and others began. I was so ingrained in that connection of based on codependency, based on fear, that I didn't know what my own boundaries were. Who am I when I just want to sleep or eat or walk or dance or sing or cry or get up in the middle of the night and write and channel and not worry about distressing my husband, who's already looking at me sideways. And I thought, I either leave this marriage or I take my house on my back like a snail, and I'm going to move from place to place. And so I started on my walkabout, and it's been a long 3 years, and surgery, and destroyed my Achilles, having to reboot my body, sitting still for months and months and holding this healing conversation in my belly, because I knew, I kept hearing for 5 years, you have to sit really, really still. You have to sit still, and you have to just let it come. And I did. And over 3 years, I disintegrated. All of who I thought I was and where I was still holding on to my story, that had to die. I had to move into the realm of what I call shameless healing. Like, I just lay it out, like take the band-aids off and show everybody the wounds. And if you've watched any of the stuff I've done on YouTube, I am just a snotty mess in it all, because we got to heal out loud. We got to take the shame right out of this whole healing process. So I did that. I disintegrated, and I just vomited me all over the floor and let myself just be ready to heal, because I kept asking myself, do I love myself enough to heal? And any answer less than an absolute yes was an absolute clear indication that things were not right in my human operating system. And I was going to get to the bottom of that mystery. Why do we resist healing? Why do we resist doing the thing that's going to bring us ease in our bodies? Why? And the only answer, the only logic, and this is where maybe working with accountants rubbed off on me, like there's a logic and inevitability to what's happening right now, that we have to move through this process of disintegration, collapse of the old story before we are ready to move into that new emergence. So I bought a little motorhome. Her name is Sally, short for Chrysalis. And I've done so many beautiful medicine journeys all over the place. I go places and I just sit and listen to the ocean and dream. And it's cannabis and it's all legal. And I'm like, I'm just the coolest old lady. And my kids think I'm wild and crazy, but there is a method to this madness, because think about cannabis. She is the proxy for the feminine in the war against the feminine, right? The doctrine of dominion, the patriarchy wants to control the feminine, wants to keep the feminine in its safe corner, because when the feminine rises, she knows how to birth shit, and she knows how to breathe through the pain. She knows what it feels like to have cramps every fucking month. We know what it means to carry the burden of choice about motherhood, about giving life or taking it. We know something of this moment. So I went on my walkabout and I came home, and we had this thing called COVID, and I've been sitting really still, and I did some YouTube stuff, and it scared the shit out of me, and I contracted. I went through that imposter syndrome, like, ooh, big deep dive, like, who the fuck do you think you are? And then I got more and more uncomfortable with my choice not to do anything. It was like, oh, this is hurting my body. This is like, where's the ease? And the ease is in trusting. Whatever your medicine is, whatever you are here to do, shine as bright and brilliant as you can in this moment, because this is it. This is what we signed up for right now. This is the clarion call, the moment that we've been waiting for. And so, some people argue that this is our destiny. I just follow the logic plane of, we're wired for love. We don't thrive as a species without figuring that out. We haven't figured it out. So all the suffering that we've experienced up to this very moment in time is a reflection of that unconsciousness. And as long as we continue to move into the future, that unconscious, there is a law of nature that puts an end to this story. There is an inevitability to the collapse. You don't have to be a rocket scientist or a seer, which I believe that I have a little dose of, but only because I'm shown things that feel inevitable. And I think all of you have felt things coming forward too that feel sort of, well, we knew this was going to raise the ire of the feminine again. Look at all those women and girls in Afghanistan, right? Like, think of all the ways our wounding is starting to be scratched at, right? Whew. So we're all being activated. That scratching of the wound, that, you know, ouch, dang, I can't just sit here and do nothing. I got to do something. And so you got to go sign up for the courses of what's your purpose. You know, everybody's looking for their purpose. They're looking for their spiritual path to some hot shit place. It doesn't work like that. You go insane before you finally trust that insanity as a whole new reality. So lies will become truth, truth will become lies, and it will be the storytellers that bring us home. And so I kept sitting there, healing my body with lots of cannabis. I was never a stoner in school, but man, I gave myself 6 weeks of being high, and it was the most productive channel time for me. Just a little bit of cannabis every day. And my body was healing, and I was healing. Because mother's milk has cannabinoids in it. And we need to have more cannabinoids in our diet. Once upon a time, that was hemp was fed to our cows and our livestock, and we had phytocannabinoids. We didn't even know what the endocannabinoid system was until a few years ago, but what we know now is that it is the root chakra of well-being in all of our systems. The endocrine system, where all of our hormones are pumping or not, and boy, does that make a difference in your well-being. The respiratory system, and creating fantastic benefits with the immune system for all of the respiratory viruses that are coming at us, and our lungs will be the first to suffer. So having healthy lungs that can process out disease, cannabis has all of that baked into it too. So Mama Cannabis is a healer. She's a confidant. She's a muse. She's a sacred medicine that's been used for thousands of years, but got turned into the war on drugs, the war on the feminine, the war on the free expression of the human story, freed from the doctrine of dominion that isn't, I don't even call it the patriarchy anymore, because I don't want to link this to men. It's not about men. It's about what fear causes us to do, and then brute strength takes that on as a power weapon. And you really smart historians have figured out where this all began to break down. I'm not here to bring you into that history, but I'm here to point out the innocence lost for all of us from the beginning of time. But we have this internal bio-navigation system built into our survival as a species. This is logic. This isn't theology. This is we-ology. This is where we meet in higher ground, not middle ground. This is, if it's true, it comes from within. It tells us it will bring us more love and connection. If it's false, it serves to divide and disconnect. That's it. That's the litmus test. Is what you're saying bring people together, or does it push them apart? Period. Is what you're doing bring people together? Does it push us apart? If it pushes us apart, then you're operating from a bias, which is a believe it is so, which is question number 3 of the healing conversation. Step this way. Let me help you unpack this. Like, we have to get down to the brutal truth that we do not survive our ignorance if we don't reset back to our internal bio navigation based in our source code of love. And to get there, we have to do some work. So we have to recognize that love and fear have a really interesting relationship. And a lot of people, including myself, used to think that it was about that they were opposites, but they're not. Fear appears when love is absent. When there's a vacuum of love, fear rushes in. So from my lens of perception, that's like, oh man, that's so much easier to show up as a first responder, not here to like fight with fear, but to just love it, to fill that vacuum, like show up with love. Like, holy cow, this is way more doable than thinking that there's an actual force behind that fear. It's an illusion of separation. And love knows how to meet it. Love knows how to. So there's logic here, right? So I'm a bridge builder. So, you know, here we go with the metaphor. So we're okay. What are the nuts and bolts of that fear side of the bridge? And it's this thing I call the curse of certainty, this absolutism of our way or the highway, like our belief that there's only one right way to get to God. Oh my goodness, let's just knock that one off the pedestal, right off the top. Religion is a fear-based construct, because it's if you don't do this, you're going to hell. Who created hell? Somebody made this shit up. This is not who we are, right? We are pure potentiality. We are born into this human story to expand love into a physical world. Now, when year 2000, I had a pulmonary embolism and died. I got to go to the other side, and there was no St. Peter, pearly gates, heaven, hell, degrees of glory, no sort of condemnation, accounting of the story. There's just, oh, look, I get to see it all, and look at how I learned. What a great story I get to tell myself if I adopt a lens of love over a lens of fear. And if we can do it individually, which I believe we can, because you're all here and we're all learning to do this together, we can teach others how to. That's why there's no guru here. There's only you, you know, you telling your story through the lens of love to others. Shameless healing. Ooh, yeah, I got a whole shitload of stuff I got to shamelessly heal about still. But when you understand we are all coming from that heaped on unconsciousness, decades, thousands of years of fear-based ideas, curse of certainty. Certainty was survival. When we first began to evolve on the certainty about what happens when that bright thing in the sky is here and when it's gone, we have to do things differently with our body when that bright thing is gone. And if that happens the same way every day, we start to build some certainty, right? Certainty is survival. Unless your certainty is based in fear. And then it becomes a curse that is passed on generation to generation to generation. So how do we bridge this divide? Well, first we have to recognize we are suffering in an ecosystem where we think we have this dominion over anything. I love that you've seen the memes where it's, man in the center and the whole, planet of all the animals and mountains and rivers represented in the circle. That's an ecosystem. Egocentric humans, we're somehow superior to Mother Nature. She's kicking our ass. Holy cow, are we going to learn this lesson, right? To our pure potentiality of being an asset to this planet, being a resource to this planet. Imagine humans showing up as an asset on the Mother Earth balance sheet of assets and liabilities. Right now, we are just the biggest, pardon my French, fucking liability on this planet. So how do we move through this? We have a healing conversation about this. And what gets us that conversation is curiosity and a little bit of innocence. Like, I know I have a very playful way of teaching this because I'm trying to get to that sweet little part of you that meets this 3-year-old who lost her innocence. That's who's showing up in this channel. She knew, she remembered. And she's been yelling at humans her whole life to please wake up and notice that this is not who we are. So curiosity, imagination is hard-won piece of our healing story to reclaim that childlike appreciation for life, to see a sunset like it's your first, to see the essence of rain on your hands and in your world and feel the power of water to heal us, right? Like that, those ecstatic awakenings in the human form from our childhood. I want to bring you back to that. So yes, cannabis is a part of this healing conversation. When I first started to bring it into slides, because that's what I do, I was going to call it something else, because like the healing conversation, that's just a really like, is that like the old branding brain of mine? Like, is that going to be cool enough? How many likes will that get? That sounds like really boring. And the channel kept coming back to me saying, no, write it down. The H, healing, C, conversation. It's about bringing people into that THC channel in our bodies that brings our endocannabinoid system back into its up-leveled state. And it heals the feminine, because look at how cannabis has survived. Who's the first medicine to be legal on the block? And also, who's the one that's getting the greatest abuse by putting people in jail, by making it not accessible to humans as a medicine? Like, we should never have tried to regulate these medicines. And in doing so, we've become victims to the power of them because they will not be contained. So THC, the healing conversation, here we are. And there are 5 questions. And those 5 questions are, first and foremost, are you ready? And it first started out, layer 1 was, are you ready for the healing conversation? I was like, oh man, ready. Is that an invitation or a threat? You want a piece of me? What do you mean by healing conversation? And then I got this whole other layer of willing and able, ready, willing, and able. Oh, those are distinctions. Like, I love words. Words change your construct. Think of how much language, doctrine of dominion language, formulates the construct that we're in. Winners, losers, success, all the words that we've adopted. And there's a beautiful book called the Alphabet versus the Goddess that really unpacks language and its impact and how the patriarchy sort of came to prominence through that model. As I said, there are really smart people who figured all this shit out. I'm just pulling it all together. I'm just noticing how all the pieces are there for us to trust, right? We don't have to do this blindly. The stepping stones are there. So are you willing? Ooh, what does willing look like? Well, describe one of those dark nights of the soul to me. give me one of those descriptions where nothing works and you don't know what to do about it. You feel helpless and hopeless because you can't fall back on the old story anymore. And you're in that bardo of trust, right? Like we can describe what this is going to be like, but you don't have to go through it by yourself. We can all go through this together, right? This where the shameless healing, like that bardo is an initiation. It is a rite of passage through your own dark tunnel. It is a beautiful awakening of self-awareness that is hard won, because the really important stuff is, if it came easy, we wouldn't have expanded into who we are today. That's when you begin to fall in love with your timeline. You look at every trajectory shifting, setback, leap forward, tragedy, all the ways that you got to be you, the calculus of you lining up right now in this moment. You can trust that. And we can help others trust that too. And we can trust that we can do this collectively if we all show up as first responders, not looking to blame anymore, not looking for who's right and who's wrong. Because man, I'll tell you, when all the spiritual people started coming after me because I was wearing a mask, I was like, oh, which side of the fence am I on? Where's truth? Like I went into this, holy cow, I can't even trust my people anymore. I don't know where trust is. Like every single one of us is going to come to a realization of truth or consequences. Like this is the natural law of the human story of nature. So willing, we can map that. But then there's this piece able. And I'll tell you, Gabor Mate and the wisdom of trauma, all of that took me into that deep conversation about able to heal. What gets in the way of being able to heal? That's the question of the ages. That's the piece that we ought to be chewing on every week in every aspect of brokenness of this human story. What's keeping us from doing the right thing here? Let's go eliminate all those underlying contradictions. Because man, when I did strategic planning for organizations, we got the picture. That was the easy part. But then we ignored the shadow, the underbelly, all the underlying contradictions, all the ways that we've woven defeat into our story. Like we have to be willing to fact check our fears, and that able thing becomes a disability if you have trauma that has impacted your sense of self to the degree that you don't even trust your own imagination. You don't even trust your own inner knowing. You don't trust life. So this is where the plant medicines have been my ally in helping me move past some of my most challenging wounds, including being molested by my father as an infant. That level of can't trust my body tells the whole story of unwellness in this lifetime. And Gabor Mate has brought together those pieces of the puzzle, like, oh, it's not a failure on my part. I got some structural shit going on here, right? So that able thing, let me tell you, there's some really beautiful ketamine practitioners around the world now that can help with that reset of the human operating system back to trust, back to love, back to not being hypervigilant and in panic mode in the human skin, right? I know I'm not alone in that description. So are you ready, willing, and able? Big question. Lots of unpacking there. Do you believe we can live in harmony? People said yes, but ... If you haven't watched my stuff on YouTube, you got to go watch it, because I go deep into these questions, because they worked me. There's the work you do, and then there's the work that does you. And these questions, if I was trying to live in alignment with truth, which I was, these questions really kicked my ass. Do we believe we can live in harmony? And I'd go, yeah, but not everybody. Can we, who gets voted off the island? Everybody, can we bring everybody has to come? Oh man, that question I heard, yes, but ... over and over again. I realized I had to ask a different question. What would we have to believe about each other to live in harmony? Oh, now we're into big toes. What do you believe about the human story? How did we get here? Why, are you a good, evil kind of person? Are you an unconscious, conscious kind of person? How do you orient to the story, right? We'd have to believe some things like basically that our source code is love, that we'd have to trust that about each other. And that not acting in accordance with that source code is an indicator to me that there has been an intruder, a malware of fear that has corrupted our human operating system. But we can cognitively reboot it. We can use medicines and tools to reboot ourselves back to love. That's the thing. I watch a lot of people in medicine circles and they'll go, oh, is this what normal feels like? I mean, is this what love in the body feels like? Is this what love feels like? Oh my, oh, I don't think I've ever felt that before, and there's this realization like, oh, why is being in a human body so hard? What got in the way of that ease of beingness? And that gets us to question number 3. Can you discern truth or bias? Bias is an acronym for believe it as so. Are you willing to fact check your fears? Like, the stuff we're afraid of in each other doesn't even exist anymore. Isn't even relevant. What is relevant is how those biases get in the way of question number 4. Do we love ourselves enough to heal? And any answer less than an absolute, yes, I love myself enough to heal. I'm doing it every day, one step at a time, right? Versus, what does that look like? I've actually had people, and I'm not in any way belittling, because I was one of them at one point in my life, is like, what do you mean love myself? Of course I love myself. I love myself. But then when you do the inventory of everything that doesn't go on the love list, you find the shadow. I don't love my body. I don't love that it hurts. I don't love that I have all the shame in my body. And then you really have to reach this point where you're willing to go all in on loving yourself. And that's a boundary setting moment. Holy cow. And then I figured out that's what we came to learn. We come from this unified field of energy, this beautiful, I've been there, done that. It's worth the ride. Being afraid of death is not in my vernacular anymore. Maybe the getting to the slide through the door part, but once you're through the door, you birth something in that moment. And it's all one big field. And the medicines take us there. Gets all the story out. And fear and ego fall away. And you realize that we wanted to learn what love is like in a boundaried existence, that love is a boundary. Where do I end and you begin? Where is the me and the we? Where does the individual shine within the collective? Where does the collective allow for the individual to shine? Where is the marriage of both of those expressions? Because it's all of us expressing and tending our own unique expression in this human form. And so, do we love ourselves enough to heal? The question in itself is an indicator that there's a malware. That's like asking the ocean to describe water. We are love, and this love ourselves enough to heal. Oh man, there's a malware, guys. It's not anybody's fault. It happened. Shameless healing, no fault divorce, no fault awakenings, right? Like this is where we show up aware and accountable to the future to do better than what we've done in the past. So the boundary piece of the human story is what we came to learn, including separation. And that's what happens when mothers give birth. That's what happens when parents abuse children. That's separation, self-awareness happens in that, oh, it's not safe here. I'm separate from that. It's baked into the story. We learn love by going through the dark to the light. And you can see us go through these dark ages, Renaissance periods, dark ages, Renaissance periods. Throughout our entire history, we are creatures of habit. Like we go right up to the brink of self-annihilation, and then we go, but wait, the artists have a way out. We're going to fall in love with music again. We're going to dance. We're going to, and you can see these droplets of the feminine and expression, and no doctrine of dominion can hold it down. They can try and arrest it by calling it a marijuana infused insanity, but truthfully, the 60s movement was just the first, the Braxton Hicks contractions that brought us to this moment. And all the boomers who kind of sitting there like I was, like, come on, is anybody going to show up here? Like, we know better. We've been following the plan for a few years. It's time. Like I'm 63 in a month, and I don't know how much longer I got here. Us elders, we got to really show up and start moving the resources and the focus. And so this healing conversation, do we love ourselves enough to heal? Boy, we got to put some spiritual capital out and start talking to people and say that conversation. Who's willing to come over here and have a conversation? Who's willing to move from passive consciousness to activated consciousness? To quit holding your sweet, beautiful, hard-earned, sacred inner landscape, so precious. Yes, it's all sacred, but nobody can ever take the learning of it away. So in you telling your story, you begin to put a stepping stone in front of somebody who you've never met, who you in some way show up as a sacred witness to them in that moment. You meet them where they are. And so what is your role in the healing conversation is to move from passive to activated, to totally go all in on being you. And I'll add a bonus question because it's relevant tonight. How are we doing on time? Yeah, we're doing. So this is the question that is for the collective to answer, and that is, what is our tolerance for collective grief? How much are we willing to slide down this path of mutual destruction before it begins to shake us loose? And when we know that answer, the collective will finally be ready for the healing conversation. But it starts with each of us from the inside out. And I'm going to share this beautiful video with you to illustrate that. Can you hear it? Thumbs up.
Some years back, we were elders sitting at a campfire in Lakota country. Leaders were sitting there. Fool's Crow. Matthew King kills the enemy. I can go on. I was a youngster then, younger. All those leaders worried about you, worried about the seventh generation. And Louis Badwoon, I don't know if anybody here remembers Louis, but if you've ever met him, you'll never forget him. Louis says, God damn it, he says, what the hell are we just hanging around here for? We should be doing something about this. He says, look at us. He says, look at the power we have. Put our medicine together, he says, and bring the rain and flood them out. He says, put our medicine together, he says, bring the fire, he says, burn them. Bring the wind, our grandfathers. We can do it. The leaders sit. They're quiet. I said, geez, Louis, you better think about that one. Well, he says, God damn it. They'll never listen until they have to suffer. Well, we didn't do that. We didn't have to. Our brother brought it himself. It's here now. The fire he's talking about is here. It's burning right now. The wind he's talking about is just beginning. The water, you want more, you're going to get it. And those that need it won't get it. No, these are the prophecies. These are what we heard. These are what we know. We've been told again and again. 200 years we've been listening to the prophecies. And the first thing you understand is, oh, they're here. Oh, that happened already. That happened. So we are living in a time, like my grandson said, what's going to happen to me? Well, that's our job. Our job is to change people's minds. People have to change. Directions have to change. Values have to change. Otherwise, there's no mercy in nature. None. No mercy. Nature has none. Has only law, only rule. You don't abide the rule, you suffer the result. And it's just no habeas corpus here. It's what you do, how you live. Peacemaker said to the chiefs at the time, he said, build your nation on these principles. The first principle of peace. Peace. And with peace is health. Second principle is justice. You leaders, be fair to your people. And with that will come justice. Third one, power. The power of being united. The power of the good mind. Power of one mind. Power. I see the Hopis bring rain, putting their minds together. That's what you're talking about. Never seen a Catholic priest bring rain yet. And I think I can safely say you never will. But we do. We bring rain. We give thanks. We work with the animals. For everybody. You're either going to change your values or you're not going to survive. I tell you, the earth has no mercy. You abide that law or suffer the consequence. Business as usual is over. We are not going to have the luxury of spending $200 billion in a war. You're just not going to have the time or the money because you're going to be paying for environment and damages coming. I said, I'll help you. I'll be right there. And that's our elders' position. When they ask for help, we better be there. Because this is it, the way I see it. The other instruction a peacemaker said was, never take hope from the people. Give the people hope. And what is hope? It's leadership. It's principle. And that means the leader's got to be out there. Fight is on. Big fight now. A lot of people in the world, really, more than you know, just waiting. And the country that's got to change is right here, this country, number one. But when they find out and when they do change, you know they're going to be happy. You know, we'll all be just bound to that happy little village somewhere. It can happen. But we're going to go through some stuff. There's no escaping that. We're going to go through some stuff. So just get ready for it. Get ready for it.
Breathe that in. It's happening. It took me 5 minutes to pull these slides up. just in the last month, we are on fire. We are flooded. The UN came out with a report a couple weeks ago that says we're past the tipping point. We thought we had more time. And that's heavy, heavy story to carry if you're somebody who feels it all. And we've been feeling it. I felt it acutely. This picture on the far right is pretty much about the time we think our land was on fire. That was the fire last year, and we didn't know if we had a home to come home to. Not for another 36 hours would we know. And yet look at how beautiful that image is. Fire is a sacred tool of initiation, of rebirth. And when we came home, I realized this is what everybody's going to feel like. We're all going to be climate refugees. Today, we had our second in 2 weeks unscheduled PG&E outage. I think we're going to see more and more of these things we take for granted. Power, clean air, water, sustainable food. These things are all going to suffer. This is what the curse of certainty has gotten us, is a world where we think we have dominion. She has no mercy. That's Lake Oroville on the left. That's the watershed for the Central Valley. And they're plowing down orchards now because they can't sustain them without water. And the movie Kiss the Ground said when it first came out that we had 60 cycles, and then they updated it. We're down to 40 cycles of regeneration in our soil. So those Renaissance times like brought us forward, but this is like a Renaissance on steroids moment, because our existential existence depends on us coming together, not to see who's going to own the patents, but to combine the wisdom. Everybody I know, everybody across this planet is downloading sacred information that plays out in their world. And we need to come together to talk about that, because you're describing a part of the future that I don't yet see. And I'm describing a part of the future that you don't yet see. And by all of us having this conversation about what we're seeing, all of a sudden we begin to weave our golden threads into this new tapestry. What was once shadow in our story is now this expansion of love. We start aligning with our source code, and when it's love, it's all things are equal. And yeah, we develop ways to create a space for individuals. It isn't all boxes and food trains. That's an insult to our creativity. Surely you imagine enough that we could come to a place of designing a human story that is an asset to this planet, that also allows for a Frank Lloyd Wright to bring more beauty into the story. Like, of course, individual expression is part of the beauty, but only when it works in concert with the well-being. And Mother Nature's given us 40 years to get our shit together. Like, dang, last year when we had the floods after the fires, our mountain was coming down on us. I had 8 neighbors I don't even know show up like, sister, let's do some sandbags. Where do you need help? Like, there is something that is so true about the human story that we put all of the noise aside. We're in the middle of a catastrophe. Like, look at what's happening right now across the South. And the fires. Man, Mother Nature's humbling us, but also giving us an opportunity to shine, to be first responders. The past doesn't matter. They don't say, what were you wearing when you went to the bar tonight, ma'am, when she's being picked up for having been abused. And I mean, we don't ask that how we got here. We ask, what do we do in the moment? Let's triage the moment and move forward. This one really kicked my ass. This is when I realized there is no middle ground. This is the cervix fully open. We cannot agree on anything. We are fractalizing our tribalism. This people I thought were sort of smoking the same stuff I would now look at me like I'm a bad guy because I followed one path and they followed another, and I was like, okay, this is I got to just trust me, and I got to trust that you're trusting you, and that it's all going to work out. And all we have to do then is figure out, how do we do the me-we balance in the meantime? And this is a piece we have to really talk about. The reason we're in this me-we struggle, this rugged individualism over communal well-being, is because we don't trust that there is a communal well-being possible. That our construct doesn't allow for that. So we stay in the fear-based, claiming my sovereignty story. Oh, I have a bat in Grace tonight. Do you know what? Oh, it's been a while since she's been in. Tonight is special. Tonight is very special. Bat medicine is when we first built this year. I got third-eyed. It came flat on right into my third eye when we built Grace. And so bat medicine's a big story for me. So sovereignty, it's a doctrine of dominion word. Look it up. It's all about separation from, having autonomy from. It's all about disunity versus, it's a word that doesn't serve us. It's a fear-based word versus wholeness. What we want, each of us, is wholeness, the right to choose our path of wholeness, right? Without having to claim our sovereignty. There's the way that we're going to use language is going to shift. We're going to change our vernacular. We're going to relabel, as so many politicians have done such a good job of relabeling things that are good for us as entitlements. Hello, excuse me? No. Food, air, water, shelter, human story, construct. Got to do those things first. Right? Those aren't entitlements. That's life affirming. And if I'm not living a good life, you can't live a good life, because we don't get out of this. Any one of us alive, we all win or nobody wins. So individualism is missing a dose of individuation. Separating ourselves from our story, not from an ego defensive posture, but from an acceptance of life posture, a consent to the human experience exactly as it is, to show up 100% responsible for your experience. That's big work. So, okay, your truth is, I don't want to get vaccinated, I don't want to wear a mask. And now we have to dance with consequences. Some direct, some indirect. And because we are communal beings and we don't get off this planet by ourselves, this is the work that's right in front of us. And meanwhile, people die. And that level of suffering, back to question, early question, bonus question, is how much collective grief can we tolerate? We're going to learn. 50 million, 70 million people are refugees. As of a count a year ago, I would venture it's probably 100 million people are climate refugees or war refugees or famine refugees at this point in the moment. What makes us think we are not going to be having to reshift where we live on this planet and how we live on this planet? The notion of geopolitical boundaries, the notion of ownership is hilarious. Go ahead, you just live out your life on that desert island over there that used to be a green patch earth. No, everybody's going to need to move. And if we can't come to agreement about that, oh my goodness. Oh, and trust is the missing ingredient, but it starts with trusting ourselves. We don't even trust ourselves. We've got this doctrine of dominion baked into our story. You don't even trust us with the basic decision about what to do with our bodies. Can you not see the dichotomy here between free will is baked into the love expression story, but we're going to take away your free will about something as fundamental about life and death that we were given the knowledge to bear. I mean, just last night, this passed in Texas, and what you don't hear the rest of the story, I just clipped it this morning, is you now have standing to sue somebody who is involved with or receiving an abortion. So if you're an Uber driver, you can be sued for taking her to an abortion clinic. And you get a $10,000, you get all your court fees paid and a $10,000 bonus from the state for this. And it passed. Now, 10 people are going to try and challenge it, but this is the death of Roe v. Wade. This is the death of women having choice. And we think we're superior to Afghanistan. Right? And the LGBTQ community, they're doing a really good job of giving us nuance on the spectrum. Right? They're the torchbearers of expression. Like nature, we look at the trees and we don't say, one of those leaves is ugly and another isn't. No, they're all just the way they reflect light and form and physical boundaried existence. We are no different. There's so much work here, and it comes down to this frickin' curse of certainty. And what we're aligning certainty with is stuff that is a bias, that has been fear-based, that has been passed on, we've been marinating in our bones in fear for so long. Being human is a panic attack waiting to happen. We got to reset our human operating system, our communal nervous system. And that's why one of the downloads was we got to breathe together. When you're birthing something, breath is everything. When you're having a bad day, breath is everything. When you're trying to heal your body, breath is everything. When I was recovering from the pulmonary embolism, the oxygen thing kept rubbing on my nose. And after weeks, I was just raw and I kept pulling it away from my face. And the nurse came in and she goes, "Edi, I know this is miserable, but oxygen is medicine. Oxygen, just breathing, getting your lungs to expand is medicine." And when she said that, I was like, I really want to heal. I'm okay. All right. I took the gift of discomfort in that moment. We are going to go through a lot of hard shit. And there's some folks out there that are really looking forward to it. They see it as part of the path home. In fact, they're sort of egging it on and trying in every way, shape, and form to justify this doctrine of dominion. We know better, this ideological supremacy, and codify it into our human systems, into our construct. And so those of you who know me know my story. I have a pretty deep religious background till age 35. And I left for this reason, what's happening across the country right now. And so if you are somebody who fits that SBNR, new demographic, welcome to my world, spiritual but not religious, somebody who really trusts that there is a higher power out there, but that it's sourced in me, that I am the hands, the eyes, the feet, the heart, the physical expression of that love in this human plane. The deity is not outside of me. The deity is me. The deity is you. The deity is us. There's a beautiful book I just finished reading, so I'm recommending it, Recapture the Rapture. And I know Lee, you're cranking through it. He does a beautiful job of unpacking the same thing I'm unpacking here. So I know that I'm not a guru, because there's a whole lot of other people that know the same truths that I know, right, Mike? I'm
Right.
not alone. I'm not crazy.
No.
No. So this spiritual but not religious is a really interesting known demographic. The United States is the fastest growing human population that basically are saying your fear-based thing's not working for me. That certainty about only one right way, that really goes against my sort of Buddhist sensibilities. Like, we've got this whole new conversation about what it means to be human. And we don't really need a moral code imposed on us. That moral code exists inside of us. It's the lens of love. We know this. So we want to get away from this fear-based. Let's unpack religion real quickly, because it's important. Religion is the externalization of power, that your salvation, your redemption is tied to something outside of yourself. Your survival beyond this life into the unknown, the promise, the reward at the end of all this, that makes the suffering, self-imposed suffering, have some benefit. I mean, the logic starts to break down pretty fast here. You put all of your faith in something outside of yourself, you then live in fear of that thing being taken away from you, or you not having access to it. So religion to an external deity is the ultimate separation from self. And to justify that, you can see where it becomes weaponized as a way of keeping people in the flock to hold the power. If your construct of God, your big toe, as I like to call it, my theory of everything, my big toe is that we are all God. We are all the co-creators of this existence. But if you have a slightly different jam and yours looks like an old white dude or a young white dude, or it looks like a Middle Eastern guy, or if it looks like a Muhammad or a Buddha, or what, however you want to celebrate, ideate your belief in something bigger than yourself, rock it out. Chant, sing, dance, do medicine, go on vision quests, take communion every Sunday, do your vespers. It's all beautiful, because you're honoring something ineffable about life. And we create a story around that we call our big toe, our theory of everything, and how we got here into this human plane and where we're going. And I have my version of that, and I like my version, because everybody wins. We all. The goal of this game is to get everybody to win, right? It's a good game, because I don't like games where people lose. That just feels wrong to me. There are no winners and losers. We all eventually, the whole thing collapses. You can see it, how it's collapsing now. So this externalization of power is the ultimate separation from self. And my big toe includes a universal perspective. Others have a more humanoid, deified. Some have a nature organized way of thinking about that higher power. I celebrate them all. I honor them all. And all I ask is that you check your big toe against this one thing. Is it sourced in love or fear? Does it bring more love and connection, or does it exacerbate and create more separation and division? And when you can answer that question honestly, then you are really ready to have a conversation about the difference between what is truth and what is a bias, what is a believe it is so. Religion is a believe it is so. Some of the things that people attach to, even in the spiritual community, I go, okay, that's cool. All of it's beautiful. whatever helps you grok out the story that brings you to your centeredness, I'll love it all. But when we even become dogmatic about the spiritual practices that we attach to, we're no different from that externalizing of power that we see in formalized religion. So I'm just throwing a red flag out there. Always be willing to ask yourself the question, is this belief, is the way I'm representing this belief in the world bringing more connection and love to the moment, or does it create more division? Where did you guys go? I lost you in my imagery. There we go. What are you guys seeing? Oh, there we go. There we are. All right. So Buckminster Fuller, quite clearly, our task is predominantly metaphysical. For it is how to get all of humanity to educate itself swiftly enough to generate spontaneous social behaviors that will avoid extinction. Like this is the race to the finish line, you know, between healing and resistance to healing, between loving ourselves and not loving ourselves. This is the tension of the moment that we are in. And so it's time to really step up to the conversation. And sometimes we have to go through kind of a dark night of the soul. And this is what mine was about. When the cost of not changing finally outweighed the cost of staying the same, I was willing to disappoint another rather than betray myself. I was willing to take the bards of boundary setting with family and friends. I arrived at a time when the only option was to trust the unknown and let it unfold. There's a beautiful quote that I love that I just, if I must fall, let me fall, for who I will become will catch me. It's by Baal Shem Tov. And we're going to fall. We're going to fall, but because we're sourcing from within, we will know how to land. Day by day, inductive, step by step, we will know how to land. And so from my perspective, heaven on earth is just a choice point away. A moment of collective consent to the human experience, exactly as it is, to be fully present in the moment, not attaching to the past of how we got here, who was to blame, but to really show up with a no fault, shameless healing, first responder jumpsuit on, right? Like, does it really matter who's right and who's wrong right now? Or is it more important that we figure out how to move forward and heal the mess we've created for ourselves? That's that step that Maslow talks about between self-actualization and self-transcendence. Like, at some point, I just don't matter anymore. I just got to do what I can do. Right, Karen? That's what we're here to do, is show up and go all in on us. So this is a map that came through a while back, and I shared it in the Healing Supremacy session I did back in January. And it's pretty in depth, and I'll take you deeper on it on another night. I'm going to do one of these every Wednesday night until I feel like I can't anymore, but there's just so much that wants to come through. And unpacking ideological supremacy really starts with that original wound being passed on, feeling that we don't belong here. No wonder people don't consent. Like, it's like a child. Our human story right now is throwing a tantrum because we don't like the way things are going. And there is a maturation of the human story that's, we will either tantrum ourselves to death, or we will, the adults in us will stand up and go, we're doing this to ourselves. Does anybody notice that we're actually, all this suffering is sort of self-imposed? All this tantruming is something we have control over, right? At some point, we're going to get to that. But in the meantime, we have this community immunity issue. And as long as we are not able to be in community with each other, we're going to have a lot of issues around our physical immunity, because we don't feel safe. And when you live in a fear-based body, panicked at being here in a physical world all the time, no wonder we're unwell. We're ill at ease in the human form. We have not consented to being here because we think consent means we're responsible for everything that happened. No, in this moment, if we all show up together, we can say, all right, we get it. We've got a mess to clean up on aisle 3, but let's go do it. We can do this, right? The human mind is a gift, but it has been corrupted by this malware of fear. So it's a race. Dear human race, we are weary from running the human race. We run from ourselves, each other, from life. Weary to the bone, down on our knees. Please, please, please wake up to see it doesn't have to be this way. We have the power inside us to claim our destiny, to embrace our birthright of divinity. The children are watching. What do you think children are learning right now as we're going through this fight over how to keep them safe? Like, how to reconcile that as a child. People willing to fight over whether or not it's worth keeping children safe. Like, there is a collective wound in this generation. 70 million refugees, maybe 100 million now. Half of them are children. We have so much work to do to recapture our own lost innocence. You know, the minute you put up pictures of children and sloths, baby sloths too, it softens the heart. It opens the visceral flow of love, and in that expression we meet each other in our innocence. Like, you put a group of strangers in a room and children, little ones, come through the door, and you see it at weddings, you see it in grocery stores and concerts. Everybody stops what they're doing, right? It pulls as there's a beckoning in the knowing of that's inside all of us too. And they didn't grow up to hate anybody. They didn't grow up to feel like they didn't belong here. That malware of fear is for all of us to be aware of, that we can fix this. It's a knowable issue. And we know this because our body is wired for love, and everything we do to keep attuning to that source code of love brings our bodies back into their highest frequency of expression. This map takes a lot of unpacking as well, but the number one thing I would have you note is the difference between individual rule, which is a fear-based response, individualism, rugged individualism, me over the we, versus the golden rule, which is we do unto others that which would we have done unto ourselves. And right now we don't trust that in each other. But, you know, love is the source code, golden rule. That's all we needed. Every religion has those cornerstones of truth. So if we unpack all of the other stuff that we've placed around the religion, keep the stuff that edifies us and elevates our faith and our trust in the love story of the human story. Those are beautiful things, but let's take away all the things of condemnation that separate ourselves from being in communion with each other. It goes against our own enlightened self-interest to buy into a story of separation. That just, I'm sorry, it doesn't compute. We are here to solve for X. X is love. Simple, real simple. This is it. This is every day waking up saying, how do I solve for X? In the grocery store, how do I bring more love to this moment? I smile. I move a cart. I offer to reach for something. Activated consciousness is not go start a mountain movement. You don't have to climb a mountain. You don't, although some of us have taken some movements in that direction, but it's in the moment, in the present moment. You're here to solve for X. And if you have reached that point in your awareness that there is nothing to forgive in the other, only innocence lost to be met in the other, thereby removing the otherness between us, then moving to this place of solving for X in everything we do, every situation, not being concerned about whether we're right, who's wrong, love is boundaried. You do get to draw boundaries around behaviors, but we draw boundaries. We have edges for everything. We're triggered by everything, and we just cannot meet each other in middle ground anymore. There's no nuance, and that's by design. As this polarization is opening up the cervix of humanity to birth itself, nuance is in our hearts. That's where we find the ease of the moment, that we just, and I love this story. A man gets on a train and he's got 3 unruly, rather disheveled children in tow. He's checked out, spaced out, not paying attention. And everyone on the train is folding their arms in the body language. And I've been there. We all have those moments of, what's this guy thinking? Show up, be a dad, right? And a woman, and I've been this woman a few times on airplanes, leans over and starts to entertain the children and has some gum or something and distracts them, and then checks in with the father, and he starts to break down that his wife has just died and he hasn't told his children yet. And he's waiting until he can get to his parents' house where they can all be there to hold the children. And all of a sudden you look at him and you think, he's not a deadbeat dad. He's not distracted. He's in context of grief. And all of a sudden, all the judgments go away. That's the level of awareness that solving for X is in every interaction that we have with other humans. Does that make sense? We don't know what got them to that moment of frustration, anger, rage. We don't know. But we've been there ourselves, and we know that so much of what we've done in the past is unconscious, so we can show up with a boundary and not let people hurt us. But I love this quote by Charlie Chaplin. You need power only when you want to do something harmful. Otherwise, love is enough to get everything done. Showing up with love, even if it's brief encounters, this is so missing from what's happening out there right now. And we have to be able to begin to flip this script actively. So what is your big toe? What is your theory of everything? Does it include a godlike figure? Does it include something happened before we got here? Soul contracts, astrology, astronomy, Pleiadians, Arcturians, all the ways that you fill out your big toe. Rock it out, brothers and sisters. Does it solve for X? X equals love. As long as your big toe lines up with love, now we're not stepping on each other's big toes. Now we're learning to dance in the boundaried existence of the human expression. Your edges meet my edges. We don't ram edges into each other. We don't kick each other with those big cowboy boot toes out there in the world. So does your big toe, does your believe it as so's meet the test of love? Is it inclusive? Does it promote love or fear? Does it seek to convince others? That's where that curse of certainty needs external validation over and over again. Or does it connect others? Right? So my big toe is that life happens for us, not to us. And from that lens of perception, man, you cannot be a victim to your story. You are a student, and you better go to school on your wounding and find all of the beautiful gifts from your story so you can harvest them, reap what you sowed, right? Get the benefit out of all of those hard lessons, master it. Don't just become a student of your story, master your story. Fall in love with it, head over heels in love with it. Having a pulmonary embolism was horrific and the best thing that ever happened in my life, right? Like some of the fire, whoo, that was a big one last year, but holy cow, our land's coming back stronger and we're more committed than ever to regenerative farming. I'm not sure we would have been minus the fire. And it's hard when you're in the middle of grief. It's hard to forgive when we think somebody brought that grief on, and often that is the case. But the longer we let that grief be something we are victim to rather than student of, we suffer. So there's forgiveness, but I learned a big one about, I took the month of August to go deep into myself to learn this piece about my dad. The same structural impediment that kept me from healing, not trusting, not loving myself, he had about himself. And in that way, I was able to not only forgive him, but release his energy from my story. Because as long as I was doing the same thing to myself, beating myself up for not being able to heal, talk about mind fuck. Oh my God. That one goes on in eternal loops of despair. Like, why can't I get this? Why is this so hard? And it's because I still was accepting that there was someone to blame. And there really never was. So life happens for me, not to me. Boy, you got to go all in on that one. You got to fall in love with every bit of your story, even the really hard stuff. And that takes witnessing, that takes support, that takes trust in others to share the story in a way that is raw and vulnerable. And so your big toe is worthy of the effort to figure out what you believe. Where does your big toe fit in this world? Is it based in love or fear? Are you able to transcend your woundology to this Joseph Campbell level appreciation of the mythology of your story, the hero's journey from certainty to potentiality, from fear to love? You know, this origin story, resolution story is not nearly as important to me as everything that happens in between. Life begins and ends with a breath. And that is an implied consent. That you're part of the human story. Breath is your ticket in and out. But then there's a breath in the middle of all that, which I call the age of consent. That moment of consent where you say, I love it all. I love it all. I wouldn't change a thing about who I am. I wouldn't. Oh, and there's still a little reserve list up there. Really? Everything, all those M&Ms you didn't need and you ate anyway, right? Like, yeah, even those, like, because there's humor in our own folly, right? If we can't laugh at this story, man, we need a better writer. We need a better storyteller. We need to be able to unpack our stories in a way that there's just no shame. And in fact, there's great appreciation for the journey, for the path that you've been on. And that's what gets us to this moment, this calculus of you, you know, the set and setting of your arrival. Was it an accident of birth? Was it divinely designed? You know, is your wound tied to your superpower? Like all these ideas that float around in the spiritual community. Choose your own adventure. I don't care, whichever one gets you out of the victim mindset, whatever gets you to the place where you really see life as this expanding opportunity, not just an opportunity to expand, but an expanding opportunity to explore who you are in this human story. Like, I can't wait until we can have a little kanna in the water system every day. This is a beautiful medicine that is an African, and it's legal, and it's a heart opener. Like, just Timothy Leary wanted to make sure everybody in Congress got LSD. I have similar but less intense aims for the world, right? To just get people to use a little cannabis, not in a fear-based way, but in a spiritual, sacred way, begins to change the nature of how that medicine works us. And it's no coincidence to me that these medicines are coming online in such a big and prolific way at a time when we need help resetting the human operating system back to love. Like, you think Pachamama's like rooting for us? You think maybe, just maybe, the wisdom keepers for thousands of years understood what it means to slow down and sit by the fire and smoke a pipe and reflect on the day. Like, there's an indigenous wisdom that isn't lost in our modern world. We're called to it in a big way. Trust that. So I love this by Deepak Chopra. Every time you are, let me just move my little thingy over here a little bit. Every time you're tempted to react in the same old way, ask if you want to be a prisoner of the past or a pioneer of the future. I think I really use that term first responder exactly as it's intended. I think we are pioneers of the future. I think we are showing up at this time in this way, in your unique expression, to be part of the undertaker or midwife team. Now, the undertakers are the ones that are holding the shadow so that we have something to push against, right? That tension, to bring the suffering to the fullness of its expression so that we can finally do our own reboot. Or are you a midwife? And I'm a midwife. Breathe with me. We'll get through this. Don't be afraid. The unknown is really cool once you get there. It's just tricky getting there to trust. So path to consciousness, from unconsciousness to consciousness, goes something like this. There you are. Something happens. You're triggered. You react. You project. You blame. You defend. You retreat. You have a reaction in the moment, an unconscious reaction, a programmed, patterned reaction to something. And in doing so, you offer more fuel to the fire of division, right? That's unconscious, as you can see how it breeds on itself. It is a self-perpetuating flywheel of pain, right? It just, so we got to interrupt that. We've got to, that's what these pattern interrupting questions are about. Consciousness is there you are, something happens, you feel the trigger, you step back and you examine your feelings. You set some boundaries as indicated, and then you offer a passive or neutral response. And, this is sort of the live and let live model of the 60s, right? We sort of, your deal, my deal. I love, there's a quote, I wish I knew who said it, but it's so true. The boundaries are the distance between you and I where I can love us both. And so for some people, we set big, very long reaching boundaries, and others we can be a little more porous with. And so one end of the spectrum are the bridge burners, like, F you, out of my face, cut off, blocked forever, all of that. Where we want to get to is an awareness of our passive consciousness and how we can move to this state of activated consciousness. And it's, Maya Angelou's, when we know better, we do better. I said before, this difference between knowing and doing, and this is what I was referring to in that little piece I shared the other day. There you are, something happens, you feel the trigger, you step back, examine your feelings, set boundaries as indicated, and you offer that passive or neutral response. That's a live and let live, and that's a beautiful thing. Here's what a first responder does. There you are, something happens, you feel an echo of a trigger, this part of the story, and you can skip the triggering step, and you actively show up as a bridge to love, solving for X, offering a love activated response. Here's what that looks like. You're willing to be vulnerable, transparent. You recognize that their grief or projection is some part of their trauma loop. And wherever you see drama in somebody's story, there's underlying trauma that has not been met. And so, as Gabor Mate would say, we need to co-regulate each other a little, like show up with that. It's all okay. I can see you're really upset, right? And it seeks higher ground, not middle ground. There's no need to prove anything, no need to be right. We're here to solve for X as a first responder. So here's what those words look like, because I think, this is for the inductive folks that need the step-by-step detail, right? Vulnerability is, I want to show up better than my impulses in this moment, to really own that sometimes coming together with somebody is hard. I'm struggling to get this right, but I'm willing to be awkward in the effort. I hope you can bear with me. Like, this is how we disarm the armament of fear that is baked into the human story. I see you feel very strong about your position on this matter, and I look forward to a day. So now I'm what we call an NLP, future pacing them. Like, imagine I see this place where all that passion can be turned into solutions for the problems, because we're not so far apart, in my view. And in the meantime, I'm going to go on and keep loving you and fact check my fears. Like I'm going to stay present to why I'm having reactions in this moment. I'm aware that I have blind spots about many things and continue to learn and grow as a human being. Like, oh my God, could we just say that out loud once a day? Because I'm sure there's some shit we've made up a right to be about, you know, some ego statement that we put out into the world. We could own that one every day. I got blind spots and there are things I continue to learn and grow about as a human being. Whew. That's a mantra. My core belief is we are all loving beings, and I trust we will find our way to a better way of being human on this planet if we remember that love is our source code and that fear is not our natural state. Fear is a tool for survival, but it became a weapon of dominion in our human story. And so what does doing better look like? This is it. You become a bridge builder. In every situation you go in, the big X on your shirt. I'm here to solve for X, right? This is what we are here for. And so to really activate that solve for X, you have to get in touch with what your superpower is. You know, some people it's weaving, helping people weave stories. Others it's you know, you're part of the cleanup crew, the grief walkers, the grief carriers. I have such appreciation for the keeners and the wailers that remind us how deep in the bone this grief that we carry is. I see gatherings where we just cry and wail and moan because that deep grief is in our bodies, it's in our bones. And if we move through this movement together, we take the shame and the fear out of it. It becomes a rite of passage out of our shadow, out of the dark. So your superpower matters. Everybody's got one. And what's at stake is the world is waiting for your innocence lost to remember, to re-find itself, to go back and grab all the bits of yourself that you left behind and bring them forward. You know, you have a sacred code baked into the calculus of you. You uniquely know how to move through a unique piece of the human story in a way that lines up with what others are so hungry to learn about. And a little bit of that, oh, I'm not crazy. There really is something profoundly challenging and beautiful in the human experience. We are the ones we've been waiting for. The Dalai Lama said there will be no more Dalai Lamas. This is a collective lift. And I've known that from the start when this healing conversation first came through for me. It was like, you're just supposed to get it launched and then others will carry it forward. But somebody's got to do the PowerPoint, and that's your thing. So, you know, this is how you get to show up, right? So listening to all of those aspects of who you are and bringing them all to bear in this moment, all the ways that we've collected skills and talents and resources and connections with people, all of that is coming into this sort of, I call it this fulcrum of trust. I love this. Finding the ease of beingness is what really is being offered to us right now. And there's no bypass here. I have some people often say, well, you know, you're painting a really big picture, but what about all the grief work? And, you know, that's a spiritual bypass. And it's like, no, it's not, because you can't get to that without doing the work. So I say to people when I ask them, are you ready for the healing conversation? Don't answer that. It's a trick question, because you don't know what you're saying yes to. There's a lot of deep work to carve out that piece of life, and hopefully those two circles merge in a way that there's a lot more of life to be lived, not just little pieces here and there. And so this fulcrum of trust, this leverage of trust that moves us from passive consciousness to activated consciousness comes down to this question number 4: do we love ourselves enough to heal? And everything that gets in the way is part of this thing about self-acceptance. You got to accept not just the shadow, but the light. That's the piece we struggle with. And especially light workers, like we're holding back. We're waiting and waiting and waiting. As the elder said in the video, we are waiting for somebody to say, hello, over here. Shine. You shine, I shine, we all shine. There's no one person who has all the right codes. We each have a piece of it. This is like the blind man and the elephant is a known quantity, and you're describing this long thin thing with hair at the bottom and a trunk over here. And now we're doing it, reverse engineering the future, because each of us has a piece of those light codes to contribute to the conversation. But if we don't trust that, we got a black spot in the grid of light that builds this new reality that we're calling into, that we're being called into. And so I want to share with you that one of the early, what does trust look like? What does really self-acceptance look like? And it's listening to those noisy little prompts in the belly that sort of make you do crazy stuff, like build a yurt. This is where I'm sitting right now, looking at this space. I wanted you to come into the space with me. There's a story that goes with how this yurt came to be that is pure magic and not just me making up shit. Like, it's amazing how this yurt, this sacred space, came to be. And we call it Grace Sanctuary because the whole thing, from the moment I conceived of it and the years of putting it on vision boards and the phone call that finally said, this is the chief of the Esalen Indian tribe, the yurt is yours if you want it, right? Like, how does that happen? I manifested this thing on our land because I trusted. I accepted that yearning is not just my wild imagination, but it is part of my source code, finding a voice. My unique source code. That one little extra chromosome or spiritual imprint, your essence, poured into a body that is wired for love. That's what we're here to trust. That you going all in on you is exactly what is needed. And Marianne Williamson has that beautiful quote about it. It's not that we're afraid of our failings, it's that we're afraid of our greatness. And I know I misquoted her, but you know what I'm saying. So my big toe definition of faith is that faith is measured by our own capacity to trust our own inner guidance system. It's about you coming face to face with you and trusting that that's exactly what was meant to happen, that you are enough, that you are whole, that you are here to expand into love. I mean, we didn't get to touch each other, feel skin, feel the rain, feel the earth under our feet, feel the heat of a fire, the softness of snow, all of those ways the butterfly moves out into the world, no longer bound to the ground, but can move about, flying thousands of miles across this planet, seeing it all. We are no different. Whatever happened is what happened, whether it's good or terrible, it was what happened. Whatever's happening is now is what's happening. We don't have to call it good or bad. It may be painful. It may not be painful. We may like it. We may not like it. Whatever's happening this moment is what's happening. When you argue with it, try to negotiate with it, try and make it different than what it is. When you say that what is happening shouldn't be happening, you suffer. This is big work. When you realize that we are doing the suffering thing to ourselves, it is our divinity to trust this movement from dark to light, to hold fast through the crowning moment of shift. This trusting the moment begins to open up this. I did a TED talk years ago about the synchronicities. You start to realize that the universe is dancing with you, and you trust a no as readily as a yes. Like when something doesn't come into fruition, you're like, oh, well, that's not supposed to happen. Okay. Instead of getting all bummed out by stuff, we go, oh, thank you. Dodged a bullet. I'll never know about it, but whatever it is, I'm into a different truth, a different, like, to move through the universe, as Einstein said, either with a big toe theory of everything that says it's hostile or it's friendly, is the difference between living in hell or heaven on earth. If you believe this is a hostile world, that everything's out to get you, that you are a victim, you will live a very three-dimensional, pain-based world life. If you believe that the universe loves us, that it is friendly, that we are in harmony with it when we come from love, amazing things happen. You manifest. I trust. I saw on the same day I got the download about the app, we would all be breathing together, that it would only take 11 million of us to breathe together to create shift on this planet. That TED talk came through on the same day of the download. So I just trust. I just trust. And the universe has said, helpers and healers will come. And they did. Within 4 months, the people arrived to help me do it. And no money. I need sacred reciprocity tended the whole process. And I trust that the next iteration is going to be better because it's not my birthing, it's us birthing it as we go forward. So our source code of love only knows expansion, even as a glacier carves its way through a mountain, breaking it apart, taking down all of its rough edges, leaving in its wake a beautiful glacial valley, a heaven on earth. Love will take us through the darkest of dark, that we might learn to see the light even in that dark. The path from darkness to light is a remembrance that I brought into the conversation in the first few minutes. Like, we all know we have this beautiful sacred light in us. Just remembering that is its own level of expansion. So the calculus of you, all the inputs that brought you to this moment, lines up perfectly when the universe needs you the most, to show up as you, to find your presence, letting go of the past, holding on to the moment as birthing love in everything we do. Right now, there are islands of consciousness out there, individuals and collectives and communities. And I think of Burning Man and the psychedelic community. I think of the shamanistic communities. I think of the indigenous communities. I think of the Wiccan communities. I think of all the yoga and health food community and regenerative ag community. There's ways that we've already begun to align around the healing modalities of this planet. And now it's time for all of us to recognize that we don't have to wait. That video came out the day I left on my walkabout to go deep into a healing space. And so August 18th, and I don't know when it was originally recorded, but I'd never seen Oren Lyons, Faith Keeper of the Wolf Clans, words like that before. That waiting bit in it, did that not grab your heart too? Like, what are we waiting for? Who are we waiting for? What keeps us from trusting? And I think it's just because somebody's got to go first. and I'm willing to go first. and Mike's willing to go first, and Lee is willing to go first, and Cami, and everybody who hears my voice is willing to be a fool for love. There is an innocence in that expression. There's a childlike quality to that level of trust that love is enough. And it is only a wounded cynic's mind that would beat that child down. So I would just offer that I'm playing with this ratio right now, is when your wounding is greater than the healing you've been able to achieve, there's an imprint, an impact, an impediment in your imagination to believe that there could be another way of being on this planet. And so in the course of these healing conversations, I want to continually come back to, how do we expand our imagination beyond the limitations that fear confines us in now? And so I just ask you to hold that expansion with me as I move forward. The elders of the Hopi Nation bring it front and center in this moment. They say, to my fellow swimmers, here is a river flowing now very fast. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid, who will try to hold on to the shore. They are being torn apart and will suffer greatly. No, the river has its destination. The elders say we must let go of the shore, push off into the middle of the river, and keep our heads above water. And I say, see who is there with you. I see you all, and celebrate. At this time in history, we are to take nothing personally, least of all ourselves. For that moment that we do, our spiritual growth and journey comes to a halt. The time of the lone wolf is over, the rugged individual. Gather yourselves, banish the word struggle from your attitude and your vocabulary. All that we do now must be done in a sacred manner and in celebration, for we are the ones we've been waiting for. Choose a big toe that solves for X and trust the flow of knowing to activate your doing. Don't just do for the sake of doing. We've been stuck on that treadmill our whole lives. If sitting still is what your knowing tells you to do, trust that. This is not pursuit of a purpose because you will have achieved something. This purpose is in your belly and sometimes sitting very still. And I believe COVID has been a gift for many on that level. Right? No heavy social obligations, lots of boundaries around gatherings. I think there's a reason. And we're going into another winter of separation and caution with each other. I think to further and deepen that inner knowing. So I would love to anchor this moment with you with the beautiful morpho butterfly that is the heart and center of our little app called Be Love. And I know it's just a first run at it. It's a proof of concept. It isn't perfect, but dang it, it works, you guys. And I breathe by myself many days. Lee jumps in with me. And when I see her breathing with me, or Cami breathing with me, or Mike breathing with me, I go, I am not alone. There are more humans out there breathing this love thing with me. And we need that, because there's going to be some hard days ahead. So I'll have you breathe with me. So as you're breathing that in, I want you to recognize that every breath you take was taken by your elders and their elders, and all the fear that has passed through our bodies generation by generation by generation is present in the field around us. And by re-breathing ourselves into this human experience, by actively connecting both the physical and the metaphysical of breath and intention, using our bodies to reboot, just rebooting our own nervous system to a greater state of ease. And doing that in community brings ease to the community, and that has just this beautiful butterfly effect out into the world. This morpho butterfly, the color blue that is unique to the morpho, is not an actual pigment in nature. It is a refraction of light in nature. It only reads blue, which is the healing spectrum on the chakra end of things, to really get to our deepest periwinkle root of healing. This is the reboot of the human operating system, to breathe together. Imagine you're in a coffee shop a year from now and no masks are required, and we're going to figure out that the vaccine actually wasn't poison and that it was really okay for some people to get it. Like I think it's all going to be moot. I really, somebody asked me once what was going to happen after Trump, after the election. I said, it doesn't matter. It's going to be chaos. We're not going to care. And the chaos overtook us, right? So you're in a coffee shop and you hear your phone go off, that 528 hertz tone, the DNA healing frequency. And you see somebody across the room and it goes off on their phone too. And all of a sudden, skin color, gender, all those separations just dissolve. And you are breathing more love into the human story. Dr. Emoto did these beautiful studies where he looked at crystalline shape of water based on the intention around that water. And if you think of your breath as having water in it, which it does, that vapor, by holding the intention of love at a really high frequency, we're actually changing the energetic field around us. And the scientists are starting to back me up on this sense of why breath is such a powerful reboot to the communal operating system, the communal vagus nerve, if you will, that keeps us in flight or fight panic mode all the time. So yeah, we're going to breathe together. And why? Because it's time. I thought so many times when I first got the download about the app, it was like, oh yeah, this is about Black Lives Matter. I can't breathe. Oh no, shit, it's about COVID. Oh no, it's about the fires. Oh no, it's about breath, 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 breath. H.G. Wells said history is a race between education and catastrophe, and I would say between healing and resistance to healing. And Terence McKenna added, and it looks to me like it's going to be a photo finish. I think we're going to go through some really challenging times ahead, you guys, but I can promise you that the way that we've behaved with each other in the past, looking for who to blame, looking for how to use the blame to give us higher positions of gamesmanship in the story, in the human story, it's not going to work for us. It's just going to perpetuate the suffering. It's just going to continue to take us further down this suicide pact. Raising consciousness is the higher ground. It's not, finding middle ground. I just don't think we can navigate to middle ground because of where we're starting from. So we have to be not islands of consciousness, but becoming together through breath and intention and conversation, the ocean of consciousness that wraps itself around the unconsciousness of our story, that we can cover it in love, right? So I think that's my last slide. Oh, one more. Yeah. So if this was good and you liked it, I'm going to do more. I'm just going to keep unpacking I've got 7 years of recordings of downloads, and each one has a little gem, a little piece of the human story that I want to bring to the world. And so I'm going to do these every Wednesday night. I'm going to record them. I'm going to put them somewhere, and I'm going to ask you to engage. I'm going to ask you to talk about what you're learning, how it's, if it's applying, how you, if you challenge me. Goodness gracious, I have no, my whole theory that truth comes from within and lies is an externalization of power. Trusting something that can be taken away from us creates fear and will lie to keep from being afraid. Like I have a whole theory of the case that I'm laying out as a hypothesis, that I truly believe that if we can align with our inner guidance system, which is when we clean up the wounding on aisle 3, then sourced from love, we can navigate our way through all of the difficulty with a collective heart. So I'm going to do these sessions, and I've already asked my kids, and they've agreed to come and do a session with me to talk about our family and the work that we're doing to heal multi-generations behind us and ahead of us. I think it takes 2 generations to break a cycle completely. I will also trust the divination side of this channel to pick and choose the topics as they seem relevant in the moment. I'm also going to invite people like Karen, had a private session with me. People are willing to do a public session with me. I won't charge for that. You know, anybody who wants to go through a healing conversation and is willing to do it shamelessly. I want to have people go, holy cow, did she just say what she just said? She just owned what she just owned, or he just agreed that he just agreed to that. Yeah, I mean, I think we don't have enough examples of what shameless healing looks like in our world. Most of this healing happens in therapists' offices, and that's a beautiful place for that to happen. But to do it out loud is where I see the healing conversation going next. So I'm going to stop there with the slides. And oh, I'm at 9 o'clock. I knew I'd be right at it. See, I don't even look at the clock, and I'm there. But I'd love to answer a couple of questions or hear feedback. Or first, thank you for hanging in there and showing up and holding space with me. What grabbed your belly? And if I took everything else away, what would you fight me for? What realization sticks with you here? Waiting. Mike, go ahead.
I just really enjoyed this. I've never spent this much time with you, and I've been wanting to for a long time. And when I saw this, I thought, this is the opportunity. This is the time. And there's so much that you say that resonates with my heart. And I'm really grateful for what you're doing.
Thank you. I'm grateful to you too, Mike. You're a touchstone for me out there. Like, I love the things that you post and the places where you show up with that solve for X in your comments. And I see you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, Linda. Jump in, beauty.
There was a slide, and I don't remember the details, but I remember being struck by it. It was actually a rubber meets the road slide, where you were offering ways to think and converse and talk. And so I'm really looking for very specific, very concrete. So I appreciated having that lens, and that's something I would personally like more. Like, how about this? This is a real way that you can apply all that you're thinking about, all that you value in meeting people who may not share maybe not obviously sharing the same values, or maybe really, they don't share the same values, but you find a space to connect. So I really love that.
One of the ones You've
I think
heard
you were
me.
talking about,
Go ahead. It's the do better.
I think you were
slide.
talking about,
Say again, Mike. We missed what you
About
said.
what?
sorry, we keep talking over each other. Yeah, I think she's talking about a slide around 8:30 or so and early in the elaboration about,
It's the
about-
do better slide.
yeah, early in the elaboration about passive versus active, or
Yes.
versus, what was passive versus,
Activated consciousness.
what was the term?
Passive.
Activated, right.
Activated.
Yeah.
And
So-
both noting at that, that moment kind of woke us back up. One of our bits of feedback, and this is similar to feedback I've given before, is it's sort of like walking in a nice, summer rainstorm. There's one little gem after another. It takes a good deal to like take it all in. And I sort of got a little bit lulled. I found myself by that time just, kind of listening. I was trimming some cannabis and that part woke me up. I feel like that needs to be somehow framed, I don't know, earlier, and dwelled on. I gave you this feedback before. There's so many different interesting slides and assertions that this could have been like 50 single hour sessions.
And it's going to
Right.
be. It's going to
And
be
so-
over the next year. Every
Yeah.
Wednesday night, I'm going to unpack more and more and more. I have so many maps and models that deserve that unpacking. Yes. Linda, yes.
And just truth, my brain is at this time of night, I'm good for like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And then I'm just personally outside. So that's a tiny crumb. And I want to attend to it all. So
Well, the good news
there's
is
a little something. for me.
these sessions are going to be recorded and you can take them in bite-sized chunks. When I first set this up, I did not want to inhibit the channel. So there's been a lot of trust in putting it out in such a big way tonight, but it was a broad brush across a lot of concepts that go very deep, as you know, Mike and Lee have been part of the inner world with Cami with me for a while now. And Linda, a year and a half ago, came for an 8-hour version of what I took people through tonight. It is a lot to absorb. When you shift from a lens of fear to a lens of love, you end up having to unpack fear in so many different insidious ways from the story that these maps and models start to just barely scratch the surface. That's why it has to be a conversation that we dive in together ongoing. So I appreciate that feedback. I know it's, what did you say once? It's like sipping from a fire hose. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, one thing that I appreciated having, paid pretty close attention to a number of these transmissions. Oh, okay, there's a subtle little shift. There's a little place where Edie, her own immediate personal experience has kind of pushed the narrative or rearranged it just a little bit. So from like a process perspective, it was also fascinating for somebody who's been watching it.
Yeah, it's shifted for me too. There's holding the space has been a learning curve on its own. How to get out of the way has been an interesting path. Sierra, I'd love to hear from you. If you would come on unmute yourself. You're new in my field and I'd love to know you. What landed for you, if anything?
Yeah, I'm just really grateful to be here, and I found a lot that I resonated with, especially going through like this situation that you're talking about with like boundaries and stuff, and how like that has just been a very big focus for me recently, and how to like put up boundaries with people who I need to keep that distance from and still have some openness, So that's been very big part. But yeah, there was I mean, there was so much information and I resonated with a lot of it. So I'm
Good.
still just trying to take all of it in, but I'm just really grateful to be here because I do feel like there was just a lot of stuff that really made me feel like I was supposed to be here tonight. So
Good.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you recognize the synchronicities that brought you here. That's it's important that we pay attention to those little breadcrumbs to our soul. I'm going to do a whole night on boundaries because it's the topic that we came to learn, to master. Where do I end and you begin? And so it's obvious that there's the physical boundary piece, but also psychic boundaries, emotional boundaries, spiritual boundaries, ethnic boundaries. There's every aspect that we find separation in us is a boundary to navigate. And so I appreciate that feedback. It's been my greatest work in this lifetime is to figure out my boundaries for having lost them at such an early age, right? I got 100 extra pounds on this body while I'm still trying to figure it out. So I have no illusions that I have mastered this. So it is a deep level of inquiry for me too, to work through with others. And that's why I say I'm a teacher, but I'm also a student in this process too.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, sister. I appreciate you being here. Oh, Cami. Share. Cami's been handling the Healing Conversation page for me while I've been away on walkabout. So thank you, dear one. I appreciate that support.
Most welcome. Yes. Grateful to, honored to hold the space for you while you've been away
Thank
on
you.
your process. And
What grabbed you tonight? Anything new? You've been at this. I've got a bunch of humans who've gone through all the stuff I've done on YouTube and given me feedback about it and also helping me expand it. So Cami's been one of those.
shamelessly healing.
That's a big one, isn't it?
This this conversation is part of my process in doing just that.
Yeah.
And being able to fulfill this message I got from Spirit to write my own story, because getting in touch with what I've gone through and being able to articulate it from a place of heart, that I'll be able to help millions of other people like me.
Truth will become lies, lies will become truth, and it will be the storytellers that'll bring us home, right? By showing up with no shame about our stories. This is who I am. This is how I got to be me. This is the calculus of me, and I wouldn't change a thing because I'm in love with the calculus of me and the calculus of now, right? Yeah. Thank you, Cami. Karen, do you want to add any reflections?
Well, I was going to say that much of what Linda appreciated, particularly engaging with an open heart with people that might be on the different end continuum. And I saw with the phraseology how it's possible to weave it together and bring it back home to the heart. And doing it in that way, because you're leaving totally vulnerable and open and offering that challenge so that there's resistance to bringing it together and back to the heart.
Yeah.
And I'm going to excuse myself because it's midnight and I'm in my 70s. It's
I
past my
know,
bedtime.
Karen, you're diehard. Thank you. I so appreciate you being here. You're excused. No worries. Thank you.
And it looks like there are a lot of beautiful people here too. So, and it's nice to have met you all energetically.
Thank you, Karen.
And I always love you, Edie.
I love you
So,
too, sister.
I'm going to say adieu.
Adieu, my love. Adieu.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Lee, you wrap us, bring us home, woman. Anything new tonight that
All
grabbed you?
right. Well, you know, what's been nice for me tonight is kind of some of the slides that I've seen before. And as I've been going on my journey and soaking in more and more of this message, I've enjoyed my new reactions to the slides I've seen so many times. And I want to say, I also really enjoyed how you actually got into a lot of the big overarching things and still made time to talk about the small specifics.
What do they say? The devil is in the details. We have to get down to that level of inductive, step by step. This is how we speak to each other. This is how we connect with each other again. Yeah.
And you have been so patient and accepting on, you know, just walking with me while whatever soaks in. And it's just tonight I'm really feeling a gratitude for the change that the healing conversation has offered to me, and the expanding opportunity that I've been able to see coming from my very limiting perspective of this is a hostile world and you cannot trust and you must protect yourself because no one else will, to little by little changing my lens and trying to sift through that sieve of, is this coming from love or is this coming from fear? I'm just grateful for that.
It doesn't mean you're not going to set boundaries, and that's why we're going to have a really deep conversation about this, but you don't have to have a closed heart either. It's that tension between vulnerability and boundary that we never learned early on because of the way that our boundaries were broken. And so it is something that we have to practice. We're such a codependent society. We've got such lousy boundaries as it is. And so this is generational. This is going to take work. And some of us have the whole physical boundary piece confused with safety as well. So, you know, you said being patient with you. You know what this is? The word patience is another doctrine of dominion term. It sets an expectation of something happening. This movement from passive to activated consciousness is one of constancy, not patience. I will never see the lasting benefit of my work on this planet if I'm lucky. It will soar well beyond. If we do our love right, it lasts far beyond our physical existence. So this is not about patience. This is about constancy, practice, ritual of holding ourselves through that lens of love. And once you do that for yourself, you can't help but want everybody else to have the same experience. Even Kitty over Sierra's shoulder. I think that's my cue. The kitty's ready to go to bed. Everybody's ready to go to bed. You guys have been amazing. I love you so much. And I appreciate the witnessing. And I'm going to process this video and put it up. And I would so appreciate your comments about what you experience tonight because I need help. I don't promote, I'm not marketer, I don't have the whole, I'm not packaged because it takes too much effort. And I'm a crone and I don't give a shit about that stuff anymore. I just need your help. I put on lipstick and a bra tonight. God, this is about as technology as I can get in this moment. So I would appreciate you sharing your beliefs and your own version of your big toe on the page. As of tonight, I flipped the Healing Conversation page to a private page. And I'm going to keep it that way. It's by invitation only. You have to bring people in. And they're going to want to know why. And that's where you get to tell your story. So I love you all. Bless you. And this is me getting to have the best time of our life. I love you all. See you soon.
Thank you, Edie.
Bye-bye.
Buonanotte.
Good night.